if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. Fairy tales, kids stories, kids movies. Haven't you ever noticed that this stuff is all a little bit messed up? Well, you might think that that was just mindless entertainment and that it has nothing to do with who you are right now. But I am going to ask the question today and make you look a little bit deeper to see what subconscious lessons and beliefs you might have picked up from this stuff. This is important stuff for every single human on the planet, so if you are excited to learn more, then be sure to keep watching. What's up, beautiful human? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jen. I am a spiritual life and business coach, and this is my little YouTube community. Thank you so much for joining me here. If this is your first time aboard, welcome. This is where I create a brand new free training for you each and every week, all about the art of up-leveling your life by using your mind. So if you are interested in manifesting your dreams and basically moving past your fears and creating the life that you've always wanted, then this channel is for you. So if you want to join me on this extravaganza, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Think back to when you were a kid, and I want you to think back now to the books and movies and whatever else, comic books, that you might have read or watched over and over again. We all had some favorites. I know I personally did. And that's just something that kids do. Kids kind of pick a favorite movie or a couple of favorite movies over the years and watch them over and over and over again. This just seems to be that way that children like to be. When you're a kid, you love to watch the same movie over and over. It's like a comforting kind of thing, even though you know what's going to happen. We love to have the same bedtime stories told to us over and over and over again. As a kid, though, you picked your favorite story probably based on all kinds of different things, and your parents probably just let you pick out whatever you wanted, and that's okay. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. That is the way that most of us have been raised. But today I want you to start to think back and think about this content that you took into your brain over and over and over again. So I've talked on this channel before about the importance of reparenting yourself and basically looking back to your childhood, to any events, to any incidences that might have left an imprint on you. So when we are children, we are basically just our subconscious mind. We are our subconscious mind walking around in the world without a filter. That means that the things that we watch, especially the things that we watch repeatedly, are going to wear off in our brain. Usually when I talk about subconscious reprogramming stuff, I bring it back to our childhood caretakers, to the things that they said to us, the things that happened to us. Those things tend to have a big emotional charge, and they can leave long-lasting imprints on you. Again, if you have never heard of reparenting work or you're curious about what I'm talking about, I've got a bunch of other videos on that, so be sure to go check them out. But the work doesn't end there. I have been really curious in this last year or so and really challenged myself to start to sort of excavate the media influences that I took in as a child. So again, when you're a child, you're just walking around as your subconscious mind out into the world, and things rub off on you. The things especially that are repeated to you over and over rub off on you. So with that knowledge, I want you to start to become curious about your childhood and the things that were rubbing off on you that didn't come from your parents, and start to be curious about how maybe some of the lessons and beliefs and patterns that you learned from watching a movie, from watching a TV show, from reading a book might have had a negative impact on you, the you of today. We all like to think that our childhood was so long ago and that we are grown up and we are completely autonomous. But actually, most of us are not nearly as autonomous as we like to think. And in fact, unless you do some of this inner questioning, this inner healing work, you are guaranteed to be walking around thinking thoughts and beliefs that aren't yours. You are guaranteed to have repeating thoughts in your mind that weren't generated by you and that maybe you don't even logically believe in and that are not helpful to you, that came ultimately from a parent or a caregiver, or maybe from a movie or a TV show or a book. Of course, healing some of your trauma, multi-trauma incidences from your childhood is super important to help develop a sense of autonomy, but it's also important to start to think about these other patterns that came from media, that came from watching TV, that came from maybe a commercial that you saw that you remember watching over and over again. It is so interesting to look back, not as an adult self taking those things in as the person you are now, but remembering what you learned from the things that you watched as a kid. So for me, this has been really illuminating in the romance and relationship category, because even when you were a kid and you were watching a TV show that maybe isn't even necessarily about love specifically, you are still taking in concepts and ideas and attitudes and beliefs from the things that you are watching. So I'm going to give you an example from my own childhood, because this is so much more fun when I share a little bit with you. The movie that I watched probably the most, I'm going to maybe share a few movies with you, but the movie I watched the most as a kid growing up in the 80s was Star Wars. I saw Star Wars so many times. I could probably, if I was pressed, recite the whole movie to you line by line. I won't do that. So thinking back to that movie and thinking back to the characters in that movie, it seems like, well, that's actually a pretty good movie, right? Like Princess Leia, she's a pretty badass character, especially for that time. There weren't that many female sort of action characters whose major storyline didn't center around romance. Like most other stories that I grew up watching were all based around the princess or the, somebody getting married. It was like the female protagonist was always secondary. There was always another partner involved. So Princess Leia was kind of an outlier in that regard. However, there was some messed up stuff in the Star Wars movies. Okay, now I'm talking about the whole original trilogy, at least. And at a certain point, she kisses who ends up being her brother. I mean, she didn't know, neither of them knew, so I guess that's okay. I did pick up, I think, weird things about her and Han Solo. Like the whole relationship there is such an interesting thing to look at. So this is something I have to realize that I watched over and over and over again. So Princess Leia, eventually falls in love with Han Solo. And remember the part where when Han is getting pulled down to be frozen in carbonite, Princess Leia yells out, "I love you." And he replies, "I know." So isn't that a charming, romantic dynamic? And so I'm laughing as I'm talking about this because it seems like a ridiculous thing. Like, what would that have anything to do with me as an adult? And it doesn't really have anything to do with me as an adult. Like, I've never had an experience like that. But I think it's a very interesting thing for me to become aware of. This was one of my relationship ideals, I should say. That wasn't in the first Star Wars movie. That was in The Empire Strikes Back, I think. But you get the point. Their whole relationship was kind of based on assumptions, not a lot of speaking, not a lot of romantic commitment, and definitely not a lot of support from the end of Han Solo. So that is a really interesting thing to unpack, that this was presented to me as a child as a relationship ideal. Nobody was presenting this to me on purpose. That should be my caveat for this whole video. Nobody was picking out this media to show me, to shape me in a certain way. Of course, we are products in a lot of ways just of the coincidences of our time, of what happens to be popular during our childhood years. Like, of course, we are all going to have a slightly different media diet. We are all going to have movies that we watched a little bit more than other people's movies. So now that I've shared this with you and looked back at the world of Star Wars and the relationship dynamics that I can see as an adult looking back at that, that can be really illuminating for me in my adult life. So that is just one example. And over the last sort of year or so, I have challenged myself. Like I wasn't doing this on purpose at first. I was just kind of like pandemic boredom. I was going to go back and revisit movies from my childhood. But it has been a very interesting journey. Now with my life coach skills, my life coach brain, looking back at these things and thinking, oh my goodness, these are the movies I watched over and over and over again. And of course they left an impression on me. Of course they gave me some messed up ideas about what relationships should be. And those are things I was definitely not aware of when I was like 19 or 25 or whatever. I am more aware of them now, and I like to think that I've mostly moved past these things and gone on to the things that I actually want to believe are important. But this is something I can pretty much say happened to me. So maybe you can relate. And in fact, I think everybody can relate. So that's one movie. And I'm just doing this all through the lens of romantic love, but you could look at any movie you watch through a lens of friendships, through a lens of parent-children dynamics, through the lens of career success. I actually saw a tweet recently about somebody who watched the Julia Roberts movie, My Best Friend's Wedding. And that movie came out in the 90s, and this is not a movie I watched a lot. It was just something that sort of goes along with this conversation. But in that movie, Julia Roberts is 28 years old. 28 years old, and she has had presumably this amazing career. She's fully established to the point of being at the top of her game. And at 28 years old, she thinks she is lost in love. She's never going to get married, to the point she's going to have to go back and dig up her friend from years ago who's about to marry an 18-year-old, which is creepy and gross. This tweet I found, and I'll pop up the tweet somewhere if I can go back and find it. It actually just brought up a good point. When we watch these things as children, we don't really realize how unrealistic this is. But if you watch that movie, if you watch My Best Friend's Wedding before you were 28, like say when you were like 7, this might seem like a very plausible scenario. So you are subconsciously taking in this message that by the age of 28, I better get out there and go hustle to find a husband because my days are numbered and I'm going to have to go dig up somebody from my past. Also, I should have my career completely handled, be at the top of my career game. Keep in mind, 28 is like maybe 5-6 years out of university, so you haven't really had that long of a career if you went to the traditional schooling system. These are both incredibly unrealistic, incredibly high standards that still so many of us are attaching ourselves to. So in my work as a manifestation coach, one of the first things I like to take people through is looking at their dreams, but getting really into the whys and the desires of what their soul really wants. Because so many times when we don't do this work, we are just going to take on these little ideas, these little pieces from all these movies and TV shows and things we've watched over the years, thinking that this is what life should look like. If you grew up watching Friends, you think that you should live in this amazing loft apartment in Manhattan, even though you're a waitress. Like, we get these little weird ideas from all over, and subconsciously we are holding ourselves up to these standards. Again, we will continue to have our brain run its track, to run these programs and to perpetuate these beliefs unless we can go in and be like, wow, where did that idea come from? I can't believe I was walking around subconsciously comparing myself to Julia Roberts in My Best Friend's Wedding, or that I was subconsciously comparing myself to Jennifer Aniston on Friends, or whatever the thing was that you watched. I cannot believe that I was subconsciously looking for a romance that seemed like Han Solo. Another element that I actually personally watched recently and that got me really thinking about this was watching Ghostbusters. I watched the original Ghostbusters again recently, which is another movie I watched over and over again as a kid. And Bill Murray's character is kind of gross. Kind of gross, you guys. Yet at the time when I was a kid watching it, I was like, oh, this is what a funny, charming man is supposed to be like. So this stuff can be really messed up and really untrue and really not representative of who we are now and what we really want. Yet those little ideas are still in there. This is all very interesting work. This is all very introspective work. But I really invite you now to do this for yourself. So I'm not really going to give you a particular game plan. Again, we all came from different childhoods. We all have different media backgrounds, grew up in different countries, but I'm going to give you some homework to do for this. What were the top 3 movies that you watched as a child? And that could be anything from a Disney princess movie to whatever movie. So think about the 3 movies you watched the most. If you were like me, you had to go rent them from the video store. It seems so funny now. Then I want you to think about the character dynamics in each one of those movies. What were the key takeaways that you got from these characters? from the dynamics, from the patterns that you saw in these movies. Then think about the books you read. What were your favorite books as a kid? What kind of books did you read over and over again? Now think about that. What did you learn from those books? What patterns, wanted or unwanted, did you learn, did you pick up from reading? And finally, TV shows. Of course, kids love TV shows as well, so think about that. What were your favorite TV shows as a kid? Who were your favorite characters? And what lessons did you learn from those things? The point of doing this work is to notice these beliefs, to notice these patterns, to notice these ideas in your own mind, because once you notice that maybe there's some idea in there that isn't working for you, that doesn't support who you want to be or to support what you want to manifest, this is your opportunity to decide what you actually want to believe and to do the recoding work to change it. And if you want to learn more about recoding your mind, check out my Recode monthly membership program. It's going to give you the tools to do exactly that. So that is all really great stuff, but I just wanted to wrap this up with the same idea that I came into this video with. And that is the fact that children's stories, fairy tales especially, are so messed up. And isn't that interesting that we love to show kids things or read books to kids that are actually kind of gross and gory and really scary? So think about that for a moment. Why are we still collectively doing this to our children? I know at one point in time, the Grimm's fairy tale, that was sort of an allegory to help kids be good. So if you were a good child, you would survive. And that's the kind of messaging we got from this. If you did what you were told, you don't, end up getting eaten by the witch in the woods. But this is really, really heavy messaging and really, really interesting that there's so much moralizing that is happening in children's books and children's movies. I was actually thinking about this in terms of Willy Wonka. In Willy Wonka, Charlie is the only good kid, right? And he is the only one ultimately that survives. It is, basically implied that if you are greedy or if you eat too much, that you're gonna die. That is a really harsh message to be giving to children. Even those stories that seem so fantastical and so out there, that can still come with a hefty belief structure that affects you later on in life. Like if you go through life thinking that you can't possibly ask for the food that you want to ask for, or that you can't speak up for yourself because then you're going to be bossy, and no one wants a bossy kid because ultimately it's implied that they're going to die. Those are really harsh and unfair ideas, I think, to give children. I mean, I think the whole children fiction genre, it needs an overhaul. These ideas do not need to be so overhanded. They're really heavy-handed, and I think that we take them in. We take in all these ideas that are really harsh, and we really punish ourselves for them many years into the future, and we really don't need to do that. So if there's anyone out there who is really into writing children's literature, I ask you, for the sake of humanity, to write stories for children that are uplifting and inspiring, but aren't damaging, aren't going to tell your kid that you're going to die if you don't follow the rules, or that if you're too greedy or whatever the thing is, because I think that stuff is so gross, actually, and it is time, I think. Humans, we've come a long way. We don't need to keep holding on to this stuff that isn't really healthy and that can be so mentally draining. And as a final note, of course, not everything that you read as a kid is going to have an undue effect on you as an adult. But I think, again, this is a really illuminating, really intriguing exercise. This can tell you so much about who you are now, and it can shed a light on the things that maybe you've picked up that are not helping you and actually that need to be healed and recoded so you can get on with the business of being who you are actually meant to be. So that is it for today's training. I hope you enjoyed this. I really hope you go take this with you and learn a little bit about yourself. Remember, there are no coincidences, which means you were meant to find this video today. So I hope that you took whatever important message you found with you to heart and that you use that to help yourself expand into whatever your next level might be. Thank you again so much for being here. If you like this video, please do me a favor and give it a like. If you want to learn more, come on over to the site. I have a free manifestation planner for you to download over there if you sign up for updates. I'll leave a link for that in the description box below. And other than that, I'm wishing you an amazing week of self-discovery and knowledge, and I will be back here very soon.